Welcome to the Narrative Mindset Podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, I would appreciate it if you went back and viewed previous episodes when you get time. Well, thank you to all my listeners. This is, I think, gotta be episode like number 91, I think. 92, something like that. You have to excuse me. I'm still getting over a cold. I had that like a week now. Went outside earlier this week and I went outside with only a shirt on because of the basic fact that I have like my car is parked. When I leave out my apartment, my car is parked like maybe 1,000 feet from the building. So I walked out of my apartment without a jacket on and went over to my car. And I think I said this in some other episodes. I just don't like wearing coats. But I'm going to have to start because I've been stuffed up and hawking up phlegm and just all week long. And that is just crazy. But, I mean, the good thing is, I did opt in to take my flu shot. So that was a good thing because I think they have some type of, I think they said a flu variant that's coming from what they claim. They said it's coming from air conditioners and things of that nature that don't have, that aren't maintained well, that you're not, the filters and things are not being maintained properly. So they're saying that that's where it's coming from and that it may be drawing maybe some contaminants from outside or something like that, which could happen. I mean, we're definitely going through a lot right now, so that's a little bit different. And then you have the I guess you call it a political debacle and that whole thing that's going on. And it's, I don't know, right now it's becoming a bit of a joke, There's a lot of truth in it, and I don't get me wrong, I don't bash anybody. You feel the way you want to feel. You vote for who you want to vote for and go for who you want to vote for or go for. But, I mean, here's the thing. At the end of the day, we all have one enemy. IRS. No matter who you are, you're pissed because FICA, who most of us don't even know who they are, is taking out a big chunk out of your check and you get what's left over. So we're all upset and there's no way around it. Moving to another country, nowhere around it. Making more money, nowhere around it. Making less money, nowhere around it. Making no money hardly, nowhere around it. It's just unfortunately, it's the American way. I mean, I think a lot of things needed to happen. I don't know. I feel like everybody else. I feel that and I have some friends in this situation uh, who are getting Social Security and have never worked a day in their life, and they're taking away from the hard workers' Social Security who have worked their whole life. And they're constantly cutting it back, and they're constantly extending the age limit. I mean, pretty soon, probably my granddaughter, she'll probably have to, work till it'll be work till you die almost, and then, you know, maybe get a little bit of money, and then, then you're died, you're dead, and it's like, if you want to ask me for my opinion on the whole thing, and I was thinking about this the other day, my opinion on the whole thing would be, okay, if this is the way that they want to run this whole thing, then if you haven't worked, if you haven't got in your time to get Social Security, then you pay taxes. And the people who have worked and have earned their Social Security, we don't pay taxes. I mean, that's a really simple solution to get over that. And they were talking about welfare. And number one, let's remember, that welfare is anything that requires federal assistance. Excuse me. Anything that requires federal assistance. That's, if you get an FHA loan, that's Social Security. If you're getting, I think it's college help, that's welfare. So welfare is a really, really large thing. But I think a lot of people want to, they want to say that it's certain people, low income people, who are getting welfare, and that's why we're paying so many taxes and all that kind of stuff. Well, I think I believe number one is it's cheaper for the people to be on welfare. It's cheaper for the taxpayer, for the people to be on welfare, than to have all of those people not on welfare, which I think, I haven't done the math yet, but I did look into it a little bit. And I think if those people weren't on welfare, then it would cost the taxpayer more, because, insurance would be higher than it is already. So that does help taxpayers and things. Although I do think that the whole thing with the bridge card and everything, and changing the work criteria, I think that was a little bit overdue. And it's, I don't know, it's sad, because I remember, my entire life almost knowing people who just, their whole entire family was predicated on, that assistance. And now that those people have to go to work, now it's like, okay, you've got, 3 to 7 kids or more, to go to work, you got to have a babysitter. They're going to school lunch, and, and their health insurance and all kinds of stuff. And it's just, how does a person who has never worked, no experience, no nothing, who's not a young individual and who has a family, it's like, where do they go? That's going to, where do they go that's going to allow them to do that? So you have to think about that, because that's pretty important. And that'll be interesting. I have a friend of mine who I've known since we were, I think, 7. And he's a good guy, but I know he's, I've known him forever. So I know that he's, ever since his father died, which was like the lottery for him, he's been on Social Security ever since. So, and I think I saw him on Facebook the other day, and he was saying, "Oh, well, I think the interview for the security guard went good." And it's like, in my mind, I'm thinking, dude, you never had a job ever, and you're, maybe a year or two under me. I'm 53. I mean, it's like, I'm hoping for his sake that they don't say, okay, you're on Social Security, but you can work. So that means you don't really need Social Security. So we're going to take you off of this, and you're going to have to go get a full-time job like everybody else. And that's, for him, it's like it's almost like a death sentence for him, because he, his whole entire life has been on, just getting the Social Security. So I wouldn't know how that would work for him. I really don't know. I mean, I would assume that it would work. Yeah. I don't know. I would assume that it would be decent, but it just all depends. Myself, I've never. Well, you know what? I take that back. I was going to say I never have been on it, but I was on it because when I was younger and I needed a little bit of help, and I've always been the kind of person that was like, no, I'm not going to do it. Not going to do it. I'll just, I'll suffer before I do it. And I spoke a little bit about this in a previous episode. I don't know, we're taught that, being a man is suffering in silence, and that makes you more of a man. And that's arguable between men, but I don't think it does. It just, I don't know. It's a real, it's a real different situation, I guess, because I got it because I have 2 daughters, and I had full physical custody of my one daughter, and I was raising her and everything. And at one point I said, well, maybe I'll go see if I can get, a little bit of help, a little bit of food stamps, just to help with food, because it would help. And so I went and got it, and boy, oh boy, they make you tell them every single thing about every single penny that you have coming in the house. I mean, if you're picking up bottles, they want to know, they want you to write down what the amount you made, anything. If you doing a little side job here and there, they want to know about that. Just like, and at the time, the funny part about it is at the time I was working. I was working. So let's not forget that working people can get welfare, because you have to remember that welfare is based on your family size. So if I'm with a female and we got 9 kids, I'll never make enough money for them to kick me off of welfare. 11 people. I mean, you got to be doing pretty good to support 11 people in 2025. I mean, you got to be doing really good. I mean, and I want to know what you're doing and where you're shopping, because I'll be right behind you. Because, at least for me, for one person, it's expensive. And I'm clearing, probably anywhere from 13 to 15 a week. And I'm still, kind of back and forth with myself about, did I do enough? I'm still hustling, looking at my, calculating and looking at my bank account and, my good, and, because I try to keep myself on a certain playing field. So just to give you an idea of the way my mind works is you have a savings account, right? And you have access to other things, your credit card, your line of credit, your, like I said, your savings, your checking account, and your you really don't pay attention to your pocket money, but you want to, at least for me, I like to try to keep that evened out. I never want to be in debt, let's say in debt with the credit card, and, then I know it's got to be paid back at one point in time or another. So, you can, spend that money on the credit card and then take a hit at the end of the month, or you can, do your normal thing, which I usually do, and then pay my normal thing. So I'm, at zero. I'm good for the next month, just in case something happens. My savings is pretty decent, so I'm good there. And I'm looking at my intake, so I know, I'm doing a little calculation, and I'll say, okay, I got a couple more weeks, so I should be at this point by this time. So when I pay it, I'll be at this point, and that's what I'm figuring out. And I'm just trying to calculate my levels. So then at, come, I pay my credit card on the 21st. So I know come that point that I know, okay, I'm good, and I can, keep it moving through the next process. So that's what I do. It's kind of, I don't know, in a way I'm keeping a mental books somewhat. So that's what you could kind of call it. So, and, I try to, I don't know how I can put it. I'm really hard on myself, really hard on myself, because I'm always pushing myself mentally, like I'm not far enough. I'm not where I should be. I'm not moving, fast enough. I'm not getting to a point where I think I should be fast enough. But in reality, I mean, if you look at it, 1,500, 13 to 15 a week is pretty decent. Pretty decent. But I don't know. I kind of trick myself sometimes and I complain, like I'm making 300 a week, but I'm actually doing pretty decent to make it. So, I'm definitely blessed in that era. But I think I don't know, it kind of, I think I stressed myself out somewhat, because I'm always thinking about, the future. I'm always talking to my riders and I'm talking to them about retirement, because it's like, what happens, if the economy keeps going in the direction that it's going in, then, I'm not going to be able to afford to retire. Even though I'll have my Social Security and I'll have, I got a little bit of an extra retirement and other stuff like that. But it's like, if the economy keeps going in the direction that it's going in, it's going to be pretty tough, and when you retire, I mean, you're to a point where you're too old to work. You're too old to do much. And that's why, I think that's why they call it retirement, I guess, because it's like, man. And then I was talking to one guy and we were kind of doing the math, and it's like when you retire, you have what, 20 years after retirement, if you're lucky. I got tons of friends that are dying off, they're not even making it to retirement. So it's like, like, I don't know. It's very, 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 very important to go to the doctor and get blood work and make sure that you're aware of what's going on. And whatever is going on, it's extremely important it's extremely important to do the work, because it's extremely easy to go downhill real quick, and I don't know, it's for me, it's mind over matter. I don't know. It's like, I have this thing in my head that, it's like, I won't lose. I won't let anybody tell me that I can't do something. I won't make a bet that, I won't let anybody bet me something and say and prove me wrong in that situation. They say, well, I bet you can't, lose, 60 more pounds. Done. I bet you can't, give up sugar. Done. Bet you can't quit drinking. Done. It's not even a big deal. Not even an argument. Not even an argument about that. Because I know I can. It's not a big issue. It's really not, because most of that stuff is mind over matter. It's, whatever you put your mind to, you can do. But the point is putting your mind to it and doing it. And I was, talking to myself the other day. I do that a lot, obviously. But I was saying that the easiest way to do something for those of you who may be the kind of person that looks at things like, I don't know how to do it. Can I do it? All this other kind of stuff. And before I say that, I want to say, and I think I might have said this on a previous episode, it's specifically for people who want other people to babysit them because they want to figure out how to do something. The easiest way to figure out how to do something is just to do it. You just do it. That's it. You just start. Nobody knows how to do everything, and you're not going to be perfect when you start. But I tell you what, if you start, it's going to be shit. And you say, well, how can I make this better? So you keep trying stuff, and you keep trying stuff, and you keep trying stuff, and you keep trying. And after a while, it gets better. You learn from your mistakes. But the fact that you're doing it and you're learning, this podcast, I didn't know what the hell I was doing when I started this. And let's not even talk about, the amount of money that I have into this. I mean, now I think I'm into it about a good 3,000 probably. About a good 3,000, and programs and equipment and, just all kinds of stuff. Luckily, I have a lot of help with ChatGPT and trying to figure things out. So, I mean, that's an employee I don't have to pay. I would have fired a couple of them by now, but, it's an employee I don't have to pay. I mean, let me tell you, that doggone ChatGPT, holy shit. That is, if that was a human being, oh my God. I mean, it would be like, you would, what do they call it? Almost, they say you almost blew a screw or something like that. You'd blow one multiple times a day, because it's like you'll say do something, it'll do it wrong, and then say, oh, okay, well, I'm sorry, my bad. And you say do it again, it'll still get it wrong, and then say, oh, I'm sorry, my bad. It's like, if you're doing it wrong, stop doing it. But it's ChatGPT, so it is AI. But I don't know, the thing that I think about with AI is I look at it as, we're getting closer and closer and closer to AI. So in a minute, that same AI, an upgraded version of it with, a little bit of different code in there, I hope, it's going to be your assistant at home. It's going to be driving your vehicle. It's going to be running the machine that you're working on right now. So it's like, that's pretty scary. If you look at, I forget the name of that movie with Will Smith. If you look at that movie and, it was all that was AI, and they had the AI robots. I mean, I hope that we get to that point to where AI is that good, because right now it's a little questionable. just a little bit questionable. And I wouldn't trust ChatGPT right now to help me with my, anything that could injure me or somebody else. So that's a little bit different. But, I've been yapping for about a half hour. So I'm going to be reading another story, short story. And the story is basically about just, me pushing myself to succeed and me not meeting my own expectations, but still doing good, although I tell myself that I don't. So here we go. The shrill mechanical declaration of 4:50 a.m. was a physical assault. It didn't just wake me. It cracked open the shell of my temporary peace, exposing the soft, vulnerable anxiety that slept just beneath the surface of my skin. I was lying in the cold, bluish light filtering through the cheap mini blinds of my Detroit apartment. The perpetual hum of the city's early machinery already vibrating through the foundation. "Get up," I muttered. But the word was hollow, lodged deep in my throat alongside the flavor of stale dreams and unfinished business. This moment, this agonizing, weighted pause between sleep and action, was the true battleground. It wasn't the factory floor or the spreadsheet. It was the struggle against inertia, against the simple, seductive idea of surrender. And then the conversation started. It always did. The air in the room, still thick with the residue of my feverish sleep, shimmered, and the three of us coalesced around the cheap, water-stained dresser like spectral counsel. Myself was the first to speak. He stood slightly behind me, arms crossed, draped in the shadow of every failure, every debt, every opportunity I had let slip through my numb fingers. He looked like me from 10 years ago, haggard, but with a sharper, more cynical edge to his eyes. 4 minutes, myself sneered. His voice the dry rattle of shattered expectation. "You hit snooze 4 damn times. That's 20 minutes of your precious 2 hours of freedom you just forfeited. Is that the pace of growth we should be celebrating?" I pulled the comforter higher, shielding my ears from the truth. Me, the present self, the exhausted operator of this failing human machine, felt the familiar sting of defensive fury. "I'm tired." "Myself," I said. The words were barely audible. "Do you know what it takes just to lift this shell of a body out of bed before the sun is even awake? 5 days a week, year after year. It takes conscious effort, not just to give up, fold the tent, and declare bankruptcy on this whole endeavor. And that, me, myself encountered, stepping closer, his shadows engulfing the desk where I kept my half-written business plans and the rejection letters, is exactly the problem. Survival is your baseline, not your launch pad. We're stuck in the constant loop. Work 8 hours to pay for the chance to sleep 6, just so we can work another 8 hours. And for what? 2 hours of Netflix, maybe an hour of reading before the guilt of not growing quick enough forces you back into a restless sleep. A sudden light entered the room, sharp and unforgiving, cutting through the shadows myself cast. It emanated from who I strive to be. She materialized near the window, dressed not in a suit, but in confidence, a poised, clear-eyed reflection of what I worked towards. She was calm, yet she carried a palpable air of impatience, the quiet urgency of a person who understands the fleeting nature of time. He's right. Who I strive to be said, her voice smooth, like polished stone, but laced with disappointment. Your metric for success shouldn't be, did I avoid bankruptcy today? It should be, did I leverage today to move demonstrably closer to the ideal? And frankly, the metrics are lagging. I threw the blanket off, the chill of the morning hitting me hard. I'm trying. Do you two think I enjoy the weight of this responsibility? The constant eternal accounting? Every decision I make is scrutinized by this committee? If I spend an extra $1, myself jumps on me about the interest rate. If I take a day off, who I strive to be reminds me that competition isn't resting, it's exhausting. The conversation escalated, shifting focus from the daily grind to the deeper wounds of self-inflicted stagnation. You avoid conflict like it's radioactive. Myself challenged, pointing a rigid finger. Remember that promotion 2 years ago, the one you deserved. You saw the writing on the wall. You knew the office politics were against you. And what did you do? You didn't fight. You retreated. You accepted the lesser role because the thought of the public, embarrassing confrontation, the inevitable clash was too much. The memory was a hot coal in my gut. I had swallowed the injustice, citing peace of mind. But the truth was fear. Fear of failing publicly. Fear of being laughed out of the room. Fear of having my ambition exposed and then brutally rejected. That wasn't submission. That was strategy. I weakly argued. It was navigating. Sometimes you have to bend to avoid breaking. No, myself insisted, stepping into my personal space. It was evasion. We avoid the hard conversations with the family about the financial trajectory. We avoid the necessary confrontation with the neighbor about the boundary line. We avoid the risk of pitching the big idea because the embarrassment of hearing no is apparently more painful than slowly dying inside the comfortable yes of mediocrity. Who I strive to be nodded gravely. Your aversion to embarrassment is your heaviest chain. Me. You are terrified of looking foolish, of trying something visible and failing. But failure is just calibration. Avoiding failure means avoiding growth. The collective weight of their judgments pressed down on me. They were right. The hardest part of the hustle wasn't the physical labor or the early alarms. It was the internal pressure to constantly optimize, to outperform the person I was yesterday, while simultaneously fearing the judgment of the world if I dared to step too far outside the lines. So what am I supposed to do? I hissed, scrubbing my hand roughly over my face. I am 40-something years old, standing here in Detroit, trying to chip away at a mountain of past mistakes and present obligations. I am doing the tedious, unglamorous work. I am staying employed. I am paying the bills. Isn't that enough? Just for a little while? No, myself barked. It's never enough. The moment you declare enough, inertia wins. The argument spilled out of the apartment and into the conscience of the city morning. I could hear the grinding gears of a bus down Woodward Avenue, the faint industrial clang from the revitalization projects, and the distant, familiar shriek of the AM radio news anchors delivering the grim statistics of the day. Detroit. This city embodied the very definition of struggle. It was a place of endless gritty rebuilding, where the promise of the future was always juxtaposed against the crumbling infrastructure of the past. Its hustle demanded relentless movement, yet occasionally offered stunning glimpses of potential. My life felt like a microcosm of this city, a constant fight to stabilize the foundation while dreaming of the skyscraper. Look around. Who I strive to be commanded, gesturing vaguely toward the imagined landscape of the city. Everyone here is fighting the clock. Everyone is trying to turn pennies into pavement. The difference between those who move forward and those who merely tread water is simple. Perspective. Perspective? I challenged. My perspective is cold fingers and coffee that tastes like ash. My perspective is watching the calendar flip and realizing I haven't hit the arbitrary milestone I set for myself 5 years ago. I feel like I'm running in place. Myself leaned in, his expression softening slightly, transitioning from the pure critic to the wounded compatriot. We beat you up because we see the potential. But yes, we are tired too. The constant self-flagellation is draining us all. We want the future, who I strive to be. But we are too damn exhausted from holding up the present. The heat of conflict suddenly dissipated, replaced by a strange, mutual sorrow. We were exhausted not by the work, but by the relentless internal war over the speed of the work. Who I strive to be stepped forward, placing a gentle, metaphorical hand on my shoulder. She was the one who could bridge the gap, translating the pain of the present into the promise of the future. Let's redefine the metric, she suggested quietly. You look at the calendar and you see 5 years without the massive breakthrough, the exit strategy, the big win. But myself and I have been watching you every single day. Let's look at the quiet victories. She listened to them. You avoided the debt trap your father fell into. You learned the skill set you promised yourself you would master 3 years ago. Even though you still haven't used it for the big project yet, you maintained the discipline to get up every day, even when your body screamed for rest. That's survival, I insisted. No, that's sustained forward momentum. Who I strive to be corrected firmly. You're not treading water, me. Treading water is when you stop planning, stop learning, stop dreaming during those 2 hours of freedom. You use those 2 hours, you write, you read, you build the framework. You use that small window of joy, the quiet cup of coffee, the 15 minutes of uninterrupted music as fuel, not just escape. The profound realization began to settle, radiating from the core of my ideal self and spreading to the worn-out present self and the cynical past self. We are constantly comparing ourselves to others who appear to have jumped ahead. Myself mused, his voice losing its critical edge. But we never stopped to acknowledge that we're still in the fight. We didn't quit when we had every reason to. We didn't let the embarrassment of the failed pitch define us. We simply avoided the conflict and then quietly refined the pitch later. I closed my eyes, letting their collective assertiveness wash over me. The pressure wasn't to reach the finish line tomorrow. The pressure was the demand for perfection on the journey, which was impossible. We were ahead, I whispered, testing the words. Yes. Who I strive to be confirmed. We are ahead of the person who gave up yesterday. We're ahead of the version of us that succumbed to the fear of confrontation and is now paralyzed by regret. We are ahead despite the weariness, despite the knowledge that the 2 hours of freedom are barely enough payment for the 8 hours of commitment. We choose the commitment. The goal isn't just to survive long enough to enjoy the few hours, myself added, a rare hint of respect in his tone. The goal is to use those few hours to build a reality where the survival is easier and the freedom is longer. And you're doing that. Slowly, painfully, but relentlessly. The internal tribunal had reached its verdict. It wasn't a triumphant declaration of instant success, but a sober, mature acknowledgement of persistence. The conversation hadn't ended, the grind, but it had adjusted the lens through which I viewed it. I finally sat up on the ledge of the bed. The cold air felt cleansing now. Okay, I said, addressing the empty space where my two internal counterparts had stood. They had dissolved back into the subconscious fabric, but their impact remained. A residual strength, a quiet resolution. I stood and walked to the window, pulling the blinds fully open. The Detroit morning was still dark, but the lights were coming on everywhere. In the distant skyscrapers, in the neighborhood homes, in the diners already serving the first shift. Every light represented another consciousness, another individual wrestling with their own decision to get up and face the same weighted choice. The pressure remained. The need to grow faster, to achieve more, to avoid the sting of embarrassment would always be a part of my internal landscape. But now, it was tempered by the realization that the very act of rising is the growth. I walked to the kitchen, the floor cold under my feet, and I poured the first cup of coffee. It was still bitter, still tasted like the grit of the morning. But as I stood there, watching the distant headlights stream down the I-75 connector, I smiled faintly. The daily performance was set to begin. 8 hours of work for 2 hours of life. It was a terrible ratio, but I was still showing up. I was still plotting. I was still fighting the constant urge to retreat. And in that grind, terrifying expanse of life, that conscious daily choice, that willingness to persist, slow as the growth might be, meant we were exactly where we needed to be. We were ahead, and today, I would leverage those 2 precious hours well. The hustle demanded it, and for once, the 3 of us were in agreement. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Narrative Mindset Podcast.